KRMA Denver presents the following production by the Denver Museum of Natural History. The search for the thunder lizards.
I just wondered what this big bone was from. It was a great big one.
When I was a little kid, like 8, I was interested in dinosaurs, and I even thought about growing up to be a paleontologist. A stereotype fantasy of a kid, digging for dinosaur bones.
Thunder lizards. They ruled the Earth for 200 million years. The last ones vanished over 65 million years ago. Most of us first encounter their fossilized relics in museums, and we are astounded. The thought of a living, breathing animal large enough to have owned teeth this size is somehow shocking. Still, we are fascinated and drawn closer.
I mean, they're so completely unlike anything that is alive today. They're beautiful.
They were around on the face of the Earth for over 140 million years, much longer than humans. They're food for the imagination. We need creativity and entertainment, something to keep us going and keep us in awe of things.
To feed our imagination, we humans have created popular fantasies. Much of it fun, most of it pure myth. But the story of the quest for real information about dinosaurs is more intriguing. The fossil records have been waiting 65 million years for readers.
At first they merely collected them and speculated. But later on, there came a descriptive stage, and people actually wrote down and drew and these things. And I guess it was just part of the transition from superstition, mysticism, magic to science, and the fossil study went right along with it.
In 1822, the English countryside around Sussex was home for amateur naturalist and physician Dr. Gideon Mantell and his wife Mary Ann. One day, while out walking, she spotted some strange dark animal teeth in a pile of gravel. She brought them home. Scientists later became interested, and by 1825 had decided the teeth belonged to some long-extinct iguana. As evidence of other large extinct animals surfaced, Sir Richard Owen, the first director of the British Museum in London, named them all dinosaurs. Now, after more than a century and a half, new discoveries have added more than 300 dinosaur varieties. And we still look for more. Every year, in remote locations like this, crews take up picks and shovels and go to dig for dinosaurs. As they file off to the quarry, every one of them is thinking, this will be the day of my big discovery, the clavicle of a camptosaur, or the mandible of an allosaurus. But digging dinosaurs is a physical and mental challenge.
It's extremely difficult. It's exciting. I've never experienced anything as exciting as actually being on a dinosaur dig. But the effort that goes into actually excavating a dinosaur is tremendous. If you can imagine a dinosaur with all of its bones scattered and covered by literally tons of soil and sometimes very hard rock, it's a very difficult task to actually remove that rock and remove it safely so that you don't disturb, break, or lose part of the fossil itself in the process.
And every kid is just crazy about them for some reason. Every child seems to go through a dinosaur phase.
Kids who never outgrow their dinosaur phase sometimes become paleontologists. Why do they care so much about old bones?
Well, that's a question I've been asked ever since the 4th grade by people who were interested in my education, how much it cost, my parents. A tack I took with my parents was, why should we care? Well, if you count noses in Washington, D.C., 10 times as many people go to the National Museum to look at the dinosaurs as go to the National Symphony. People want to know. People are drawn, a lot of people are drawn to inquire.
Well, I was interested in paleontology because as far back as I can remember, beginning in 1911, my family took me to the big museums, and I saw all these things, and like present-day children, I was fascinated by them. And so I began to look for fossils where we lived.
Might as well admit it was from the minute I could walk, because I grew up where the little stony hills around, and I was picking up rocks as far back as I can remember.
Suppose it's the same way that most other kids do. When I was 5 years old or something, or 4, my father took me to the Carnegie Museum. We saw the Diplodocus, which we called Diplodocus in those days, and it made a very great impression, the way it always does on kids. And I guess that was how it started.
I grew up with the Denver Museum close by. Went there every year growing up and still go there. Seeing that huge Diplodocus and the Stegosaurus there. And it's fun to go back and visit these old friends.
It seems the most natural thing in the world to do. I mean, if you like dinosaurs, eventually you go out and dig them up and bring them to a museum, and you look at them and figure out what kind they are and how they lived and where they lived. And it's just natural exploration, following your own curiosity.
Curiosity is the fuel that keeps these people digging. When they're not busy collecting new material, they continue to examine the existing material. They also analyze their own ideas about the creatures that once fleshed out these bones. Robert Bakker has re-examined a few Long Cherry's theories. He knows we don't know everything about these animals.
We sure don't. No, we're just beginning to find out about dinosaurs. Take a simple statistics. Every year in this state, on average, 2 new kinds of dinosaurs are found, like brand new, species we did not know existed. You got to understand the age of dinosaurs wasn't just one age. The whole dinosaur group lasted about 135 million years, and each individual kind of dinosaurs lasted only a short fraction of that. So there was a whole new cast of characters. About every 4 million years, you had a whole new group of dinosaur species. So there were literally thousands of kinds of dinosaurs. We're only beginning to scratch the surface. We only know 1%, maybe, at best.
Since the 1920s, evidence about dinosaurs had remained fragmentary at best. In 1877, the momentum of dinosaur studies moved from England to these Colorado foothills just west of Denver. Fossils were found in an uplift of sedimentary rock known locally as the Dakota hogback. That discovery firmly established the fledgling science of paleontology in America. At 78, paleontologist George Edmund Lewis still walks the steep incline near the road, now cut along tilted layers of rock. He knows the history of the site quite well.
Broken across here. It was in 1877, more than 100 years ago, and Master Jarvis Hall, a school for boys in Golden, part of which later evolved into part of the Colorado School of Mines, had the Reverend Mr. Arthur Lakes, an Anglican clergyman from England, who had been brought over here by the Bishop of Colorado. He was interested in natural history, interested in a lot of things. That's why they picked him as a teacher. Among other things, he made watercolor sketches. And one of his friends, Captain H.C. Beckwith, United States Navy, came out onto the hogback, and they were looking for fossil leaves, which you find in the rocks of the hogback. So after they had made a few collections, they came over to this side of the hogback and started down the slope and stumbled on a number of enormous fossil bones. That was the discovery, the first time in history that so many dinosaurs, and so complete, had ever been found, and for the first time, people knew what dinosaurs really were.
This rock was built in layers. The layers where these remains were found is known to geologists as the Morrison Formation. It takes its name from the little town that nestles in the valley between the mouth of Turkey Creek Canyon and Golden, Colorado.
Originally, the Morrison Formation consisted of sands and muds and clays the kind of things that today make sandstone and mudstone and shale after many years of burial and pressure, under thousands of feet of younger rocks that originally lay atop the Morrison. Now, as you look at the Morrison today and the Dakota and at the fountain of the Hogback, these things are tilted some tens of degrees to the east. Well, you see, that couldn't have happened naturally when they were deposited, because they had to be deposited in an essentially horizontal position.
Tilting rocks and uplifting mountains are a regional phenomenon of the colossal global dynamics of moving land masses. Immense earth changes may help explain why similar kinds of dinosaur remains have been found on different continents. The science of plate tectonics tells us that once there was a huge continent named by geologists Pangaea.
In those days, the Atlantic Ocean hadn't opened up that far. It really began to open up in a big way just about the time the Morrison was being deposited, which explains why you could have these same animals in two such widely separated areas. They could walk across on dry land. The other thing is that in many places in those days you had seaways and you had vast stretches of salt water between the Rocky Mountains and the east coast of North America, for example, quite apart from the Atlantic Ocean.
The land once covered by an inland sea is now the high and dry western United States. It is a good place to hunt for dinosaur bones. 20 years have passed since Robert Bakker speculated Colorado just might have enough dinosaur fossils to keep him busy.
Fell madly in love with the state because there are more dinosaurs per acre and more dinosaurs per person in Colorado and Wyoming and anywhere else. You can't get fossil bones unless you cover the skeletons. Otherwise, the bones would just rot. Well, on average, Colorado has been a low tropical landscape with lots of sediment being deposited. So if you're a dinosaur and you died, you had a pretty good chance of being covered up. That's number one.
Dinosaur bones are not really bones anymore. They have undergone the process of petrification that has hardened them to rock. A dead dinosaur might be covered by layers of silt and clay. The bones became compressed and replaced by seeping mineralized groundwater.
You can't find a dinosaur that's totally covered by rock. A little bit of it's got to be eroded out so you can see it.
Occasionally, these burial places were uplifted and the process of erosion would take over. The bones would eventually become exposed. Wherever people come across these exposed remains, they become curious. Ruth Mason grew up on land homesteaded by her parents just outside Faith, South Dakota. Now called Grandma by just about everyone, Ruth spent many childhood hours wandering the ranch. She was probably looking for some quiet moments away from a cabin crowded with 8 brothers and sisters. On her journeys, she picked up rocks.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I picked up rocks and bones and what have you. I wasn't too old when here on the riverbank, this riverbank, is where the biggest piece of bone that I seen was sticking out of that bank. Oh, it's over 50 years ago. So I just wondered what this big bone was from. It was a great big one.
We found a big Tyrannosaurus.
I didn't know what Dinosaurus was all about until these boys come and started digging.
This crew is exposing the fossilized bones of an anatosaur. These remains, carefully separated from their matrix and articulated, will look much like this specimen at the Museum of Natural History in Denver. The hope of finding more pieces of this gigantic puzzle keeps the diggers picking away at their assigned portion of hillside.
When I was a little kid, you know, like 8, I was interested in dinosaurs, and I even thought about growing up to be a paleontologist. And as I got older, I just found other things more compelling. But when this chance to do this came up, I just couldn't say no. if I wanted to do this on my own just for fun, I wouldn't even know how to start. So it's like you're going with experts who know what they're doing and they can say, don't do that. Whereas you might just go ahead and do it and wreck it.
Volunteers may only have a few days or weeks to experience the thrill of uncovering fragments that have been buried under layers of time. Soon, reluctantly, they must go home to earn their living in usual pursuits. What about these scientists for whom it is not a hobby, but a passion and a livelihood?
Well, you have to be excited. I'm always excited at new discovery, but having collected an awful lot of dinosaur bones, my first feeling is blind fear. Because if you see any part of a skeleton, you have two options. It means that it's either the last part of the skeleton or the first part, or something in between. And we believe very strongly in the notion that if you kill it, you clean it. If you find it and you're ready to take on that responsibility, then you better do it right. And it becomes a very, very expensive proposition, collecting a dinosaur.
Experts feel a great responsibility to do it right. Science, after all, is dedicated to the search for truth. But through the years, a certain amount of dinosaur dogma has built up.
I grew up with dinosaur books, the Golden Book of Dinosaurs, that had brontosauruses up to their armpits in some fetid swamp, critters that were sort of a combination hippo and moose, staying in the water, feeding on soft water plants. So duck-billed dinosaurs have fantastic grinding teeth. Their teeth don't look like moose teeth. Teeth look like the teeth of horses or zebra. They look like they're designed for shredding very tough land vegetation. Ditto with their legs. They're very long-legged animals, duckbills, with really strong calf muscles. These are emphatically terrestrial critters. Dinosaurs were immensely successful. If they were such losers, if they were so poorly designed, why did the dinosaur class completely dominate our own mammal class for 130 million years? That made no sense at all. That's what got me started on challenging each and every point of the orthodox dinosaur story. And when I first started, a lot of the traditional professors at various schools were a bit scandalized. Like any theologians, they defended dogma. But over the last 10, 20 years, more and more paleontologists the world over come over to the view that dinosaurs have been miscast. They weren't sluggardly losers. They were active, top-of-the-line winners.
Surely one of the most successful dinosaurs was the Cretaceous period meat-eater Tyrannosaurus rex. In a small iron foundry just west of the Platte River in Denver, Dr. Bakker supervised the building of a steel superstructure for the exhibition of T-Rex. Bakker is working to allow his fiberglass model to reflect his ideas about the creature's active, warm-blooded lifestyle.
Strangely enough, it's easier to be warm-blooded and much easier to move fast if you are big. I was brought up on those myths, too, that an elephant can't gallop because it's so big. It turns out the bigger you get, the bigger your body is, the more efficient running is. In fact, if you redesigned an elephant a little bit, you could make it gallop. And there have been in the recent past giant rhinoceroses, I mean really big ones, 3-tonners, 4-tonners, that could gallop. Dinosaurs got bigger still. Triceratops, the bighorn dinosaur, was maybe 5-6 tons, a super huge one, 10 tons. Bigger than the biggest elephant, and yet its legs are designed to produce the thrust of a rhinoceros of that size, a galloping thrust.
There seems to be no end to controversies. Recently, the question arose as to whether the state fossil of Colorado is being correctly portrayed. There are two theories about how to display the distinctive plates that adorn the back of a stegosaur. One theory says they had 2 rows of staggered plates. Another, that it was 2 rows paired. Steve Czerkas thinks they had only 1 row of alternating plates.
There is a great deal of evidence that I can provide, and it actually negates both of the original traditional theories of paired or alternating. Essentially, it does not have 2 rows of plates to begin with. What we have is actually only 1 row of plates. It's a theory that O.C. Marsh, way back in 1881, had proposed, and after his death was totally ignored. Some of the plates in this one fossil of Stegosaur, which was found back in 1877, some of the plates were found actually overlapping each other in such a manner that everyone since then, since O.C. Marsh's time, actually said, well, if they're overlapping, then it must be representing 2 rows of plates. My observations, though, said, yes, some of the plates are overlapping, but only some, and in even the plates that are overlapping, the bases of the plates, the most important part of the plate itself, never overlapped. The actual supporting structure that holds the plate in the skin of the animal did not overlap. Therefore, there's really no necessity that it had to be in 2 rows.
Even as Czerkas was stating his theory, in remote Rapid Valley, Colorado, a Stegosaurus was being excavated. When and if all the pieces are available, it may help prove or disprove his theory.
Stegosaurs are somewhat common, but then again rare to find an articulated specimen. And about 1/3 of the skeleton has been recovered so far, and the bases of 3 or 4 plates have been found. So we're hoping that by finding more of these plates, if they are intact, and with the neural spines coming up off the backbone, the vertebrae, leading up to those and how they articulate, how they fit onto those, that it'll show us whether they may be in paired rows, which is the old theory, or whether the bases of the plates are butted up against each other with the tips staggering in an alternate manner. That's one thing that's exasperating about paleontology, is that you can never stand firm on something, but it also makes life interesting.
We hope it's a skull.
We're not just after the bones, but the information with them as well.
There's nothing there.
Being a science that there's always growing potential, stegosaurs are being found to this day. Personally, I hope that it retains the single row from a personal standpoint, but even if it doesn't, it's the professional accuracy that anyone has to strive for. It's just the name of the game.
It seems general knowledge that Stegosaurus lived on dry land, but he may have had gigantic, elongated company. One piece of evidence used to place Brontosaurs in that fetid swamp was that Brontosaurs had nostrils between the eyes. It seemed obvious they must have been blowholes, like those on a whale.
Sounds good, right? Unfortunately, everything else about a Brontosaurus screams landlubber. This was a land-designed creature. The feet were very compact. The toes didn't spread. Those were feet for walking on firm ground, not muck. The legs are very long, like an African elephant's, for striding in great long paces over dry ground. So, what about the blowhole? Why do brontosaurs have this very funny position of their nostrils? I think there's a very simple explanation and an exciting one. These things made noises. These things sang. That's not a blowhole. That's the end of the instrument. When Brontosaurus exhaled, which it could do with prodigious power, the sound came up through the snout, underneath these snout bones, was channeled by various little partitions, and then out through here. So the explanation to the mystery of the Brontosaur blowhole is that, yes, it blew notes, it blew music, and it blew music on dry land.
Massive efforts go into the search for and interpretation of dinosaur remains. The question becomes, what do we learn?
Dinosaurs are things to think about. They were a very successful group. They were around on the face of the earth for over 140 million years, much longer than humans. And if we can figure out ways that they adapted how they lived, maybe we can survive a nuclear holocaust or something like that. You never know, because dinosaurs certainly went through a lot of volcanic ash storms and things like that.
And they didn't die once. The dinosaurs suffered 4, well, at least 3 and maybe 4 mass extinctions when most of them died out. The very last of these mass extinction was the event that killed off all dinosaurs except for the birds. So it's a very general question to ask, well, why are these crises? Why are there these stock market crashes in evolutionary time?
A distinct drop in temperature and humidity could do it. Or with dinosaurs that can't crawl into rock crevices like rattlesnakes to pass the winter, if we had highly seasonal changes in temperature, that could have contributed. It could have been a large number of factors, all of which, if they came together at the same time, could have wiped them out.
One point that's very interesting is mass extinction has never, ever hit cold bloods. There never has been a mass extinction of giant tortoises, or crocodiles, or alligators, or giant lizards. Cold bloods seem to be immune. It's only the warm bloods that get hit. What I think killed the dinosaurs is really totally surprising in how unsurprising it is. It's a very mundane cause. It's the most dangerous threat that's facing us humans and us mammals. The biggest danger to us is not a comet striking. It's not a sudden change in climate, because warm bloods can handle a change in climate. It's not a change in how warm it is, or how hot it is, or how much rainfall. The biggest danger to warm bloods is exotic disease.
Scientists continue to dig for information. It is an exciting time for finding more about dinosaurs. New evidence points not to a slow, plodding, dumb, cold-blooded creature, but to a speedy, smart, perhaps warm-blooded animal. Meanwhile, who knows what fossil may even now be exposed and awaiting discovery on some unexplored hillside.
I hope that the future will be as the past has been. That new discoveries will be made, new theories will be formulated, both the field work and the laboratory work by highly competent people, and that we'll get as many new discoveries in the future as we've had in the past, both in theory and in fact.
Well, obviously, I would like to see a great number of them dug up and studied.
This is a real exciting time for paleontology. In fact, it's almost impossible to keep up with the amount of literature that's coming up and the new theories.
Oh, I would like to go outside and dig a hole.
Piece of it. Piece of it. Ooh. On the tube.